right?
What?
You care that you were yelled at?
No, I don't. Yelling at me is non-productive.
Need a hurt feelings report.
Okay. Did you tell us who you are and why you're here?
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you?
No.
No.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm from near Atlanta, Georgia. I do GIS, microstation AutoCAD. My husband and I own a trophy recognition awards engraving business. And I'm just here to learn more and actually implement things.
Sometimes I need engraving.
Hey,
Sweet.
And
we got
awards.
laser engravers.
Laser engravers.
All right.
All right. Will.
I am Will, and from Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks area. And I'm here. I just, I don't even care what's going on. I just like coming and hanging out with everybody. Some of the best people I've ever met. And I just always get recharged and inspired, and to go home and actually execute some things. I'm always taking on too many things.
So you're telling me all that work we put into getting the perfect class lineup, you're like, nah, I'm just going to go.
Oh yeah.
Come on, we got Alan Booker for 2 half days.
That's awesome.
I'm going to skip you, Alan, because we're going to talk a lot about you tomorrow. Mike.
Yeah, I'm from
I know your name. But...
New Jersey, originally been in Tennessee almost 4 years now, love it. And gone to all the self-reliance festivals, and good to see people, haven't seen Carrie in a while, and everyone else, and really like the learning and the project ideas and the motivation, that's why I'm here.
Cool. Gary?
Carrie Brown, Strong Roots Resources is my little shindig going on 5 years now. Like a lot of you guys, this is my annual family reunion that I make sure to come out and do. I'm the plant nerd. I'm kind of the permaculture guy. Lately, I'm really into talking about pasture rotation with sheep. So if you get me started on that, I can tell you whatever you want to know about what I've learned in 3 years of running these sheep. And I'm just kind of leveling up my knowledge. So I'm super stoked that Alan's here, because I want to be like 10% as smart as Alan when I'm Alan's age. So I'm gonna just soak it up.
Andy, Rebecca.
I'm Andy Eddings. This is my new fiance, Rebecca James, and we're from the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. I'm a UPS truck driver. She's an accountant, works from home for Westrock Smurfit. And we're just here hanging out with friends.
Okay, we'll do Gavin.
I'm Gavin from Ottawa, Canada. I think I'm come from the furthest away, unless anyone wants to challenge me. I'm here because my wife went off with her friends on a really great vacation, and I said, I need to go somewhere too. And Nicole mentioned her workshop, and I saw the speaker list, and I said, that's where I'm going.
Awesome.
So that's why I'm here, to learn a bit
There's something you have to share with us, too. Do you want to talk about that now?
more later.
Okay, later. Fine. It's a mystery. That makes it much more interesting, too.
Adding some intrigue.
Okay, so as y'all know, Dawn Gorham's mother-in-law passed away, so we're not having the session from her. I'm going to see if I can get her on a webinar about how to develop revenue sources on your homestead. If that happens, you all get in for free. Because you were expecting that when I sold the ticket. But
Plan B.
Plan B had already contacted me when my agenda was full with a really interesting topic. I like to refer to this. It's Eric Lewis, who has been, this is your third one?
Third one, yep.
Third one. And he's from Florida, at wealth of information on like Airbnb, real estate sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he may, during this session, not totally answer your question and answer it privately later. So if you feel like your question was blown off, you're probably not blown off, but you need to make time to talk to Eric. He has a pretty intriguing background that you'll tell him more about that.
Yeah, I'll give
right?
a little bit about that.
So I've been referring to this session as you're not prepared enough. But he's going to talk about lessons learned from having 7 feet of water in your house?
No, 7 feet of storm, 8 feet of storm surge, but
Yeah.
about 3.5 feet.
3.5 feet of water in his house during Helene.
Yeah, Helene.
And what has happened since then. So I'm going to hand it to you.
Sure.
For that.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that, Nicole. All right. So As Nicole said, my name is Eric Lewis. I'm originally from Southern California, so I consider myself a refugee from California. But I've bounced around a lot and lived all over the country, around the world a little bit. I was a career Army. I did 22 years and change in the Army, but had a really interesting career. Started off as an infantry guy, got my commission as an infantry officer on August 10th of 2001. About a month later, things changed a little, and so I did some time. It wasn't the 101st Airborne. I was a rifle platoon leader going through the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Had some interesting times. It was an amazing unit I served with. Like one highlight of I was as a rifle platoon leader, I was on a mission. I was responsible for about 4 blocking positions surrounding a house raid that ended up in a large firefight that resulted in the death of Saddam Hussein's 2 sons, Uday and Qusay. That was a long day. Ooh, a hot one too. And then I decided infantry wasn't the life I wanted. I wanted to pivot and transition career-wise, and so I ended up going back to California, joined the National Guard unit that was full-time, doing counter weapons and mass destruction work and hazmat type work. So did that for a number of years as an advisor, working with city, county, state, federal resources as a advisor, planner, as a preparedness, disaster response. I've supported wildfires, helped run evacuation centers, things of that nature. And then it was a highly technical field, so I thousands of hours of training. Then I ended up getting recruited into back to regular active duty as a nuclear and counterproliferation officer. And that was a fun career. I worked in interesting positions. I was a scientific and technical intelligence analyst for a while. Got to go to graduate school, which was pretty nice, fully paid, San Diego, and bought a little place there. And I've had a few properties in California. Started renting rentals like 2007-ish or so. And then I had a position that was in Japan that was pretty amazing. I worked as an advisor to militaries and governments around Asia, primarily Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. Spent a lot of time in and out of those countries. Really exciting. Met my wife there, and then ended up then I shifted over to be working on a nuclear disablement team. So I was trained to go shut down nuclear reactors in adversarial countries where they either possess nuclear weapons or nuclear reactors. So they did that for a while, and then I also was a campaign planner, and then ended up my last assignment where I retired out of was in Florida. Went to Special Operations Command headquarters and worked out of there, and then had to change. I had a plan to kind of continue in that field, and everything kind of got kicked out from under me. About 10 years prior to me retiring, I had suffered a major brain injury in Afghanistan, and I fought hard just to keep my job. I loved it, but things changed, and then I started to succumb to more issues, and I was having trouble. So I was like, okay, I couldn't do what I wanted. I was getting lost in the building, and so I had to tell myself, "Hey, boss, I'm not doing good." And they're like, "Okay, take a knee." So then retired, medically retired after 22 years, and I had to relook at everything. So it was like, okay. Luckily, I had a few rentals, so that's been able to sustain my wife and I. And then she's been helping more as a caregiver, and she shuttled her career. And then we have a young daughter, so we've been homeschooling her and enjoying that. And probably, I guess I retired like 3 years ago, and been kind of in my healing journey. And it's been interesting, and I've been going around to different veteran healing retreats, different things of that nature. When I was starting to go through the injuries, Special Operations Command has a special program called Care Coalition where they try to really take care of their wounded and injured. And then I got on a military adaptive sports team for them for SOCOM and competed around during Warrior Games, which was like a miniature Paralympics. And I did some of that I was on a team for several years. I've done a few competitions. And it's pretty fun. So did wheelchair basketball and cycling and shooting. So like Olympic class stuff is pretty fun. Did swimming. Bunch of little cool stuff, and then went through a lot of different retreats and was thinking about it's pretty cool to go and heal, and sometimes it's just for the veterans, sometimes it's for veteran families, sometimes it's for couples, and I'll touch more on that a little bit later, but that's kind of a background of where I'm at. And I'm out in a little town called Madeira Beach, and it's on a barrier island in Pinellas County, which is in the Tampa Bay area. I also have a little cabin and some raw land too up in Blue Ridge Mountains in Georgia. So I love that area, and then got some Army buddies up there, and so it's kind of cool. I've been interested in wanting. I got the motivation like Patrick Romer to really develop stuff, but I've had to relook at what can I actually accomplish. How can I do it? Okay, all my faculties aren't quite there. A lot of injuries, banged and boomed, and a lot of blast injuries and blunt trauma injuries over a 20-year period. So, but I'll get started here. Kind of already talked about who I am, and then I'll give a little bit of summary on Hurricane Helene, and then like some impacts on local businesses and residents. And I'm going to talk about like recovery process and progress and the obstacles. That's a real interesting one. And then moving forward, I'm looking at a situation where either I got to repair my place or tear it down and build up. So I'll talk to that a little bit. And this was one of my neighbors across the street that stayed through the hurricane.
Remember when you posted that?
Yeah, he took that picture from his elevated home across the street or across the canal. So this is a canal I live on, and we took, so there, I wasn't really too aware, but now I had to get into the weeds on, okay, what's a base flood elevation? What's this? Getting surveys of the property and having to deal with that. And so I was in Tokyo when this happened. I was not ready. I was not prepared. I was out, my wife's little brother was getting married, so I was going out to watch a wedding, and then we were going to do some travel. We had a bunch of travel plans through Asia, but things changed. So as soon as this started happening and talking with my neighbors and seeing what's going on, I was like, oh boy, this is bad. And caught the next flight home I could. So the area where I just showed you the picture, my house is here. And it's a cool little popular little like village. It's called John's Pass Village where I live behind. And it's an old fishing town. So there's a lot of commercial fishing boats, but it's now a big tourist hub. This is the #1 tourist hub for the whole county I live in. And it's easy. That's my daily walk is coming down to the beach, walking around. You might have noticed some beach debris outside of stuff we pick up and collect all the time. Tons of restaurants. Like this little town they live in is the whole city is about 4,000 residents, but we get about 4 million visitors a year. So it's a pretty interesting place. And yeah, it's quite an interesting place. It's a really fun place for fishing and stuff. But here's some stats on Hurricane Helene. So it's September 26th. It was Category 3, but it was further out in the Gulf, and we took storm surge. And we had wind, but not that bad. And it was peak surge about 8 feet. There's a couple little elevation differences, but my base flood elevation is 4.5 feet. I ended up with like 42 inches inside the house. And when the water comes in, water starts to equalize through things like toilets. So we had, and then also part of the protocol for the city and county is to dump the sewage out into the water. And then I think that helps them to equalize, or I don't know. I'm not sure what they do, but so now it's covered. Everything's covered in raw sewage. So the house is covered everything covered in raw sewage, stuff floating all around. And I sometimes before I'd stack things, but this time I wasn't ready. I had 2 suitcases and it was like, okay, like, all right. And then things were getting knocked down, refrigerators floating around. Things were it was a sloshing mess of all sorts of stuff. FEMA was declared a federal disaster, and then FEMA came in. It took about a couple days. Then we also then sustained another major hurricane 2 weeks later. So that was a big wind event. I think around where my property is, we were taking wind up to about 120 miles an hour, and it was pretty bad. Like immediate next door neighbor, he sustained like 20 something inches in 22 inches, 23 inches of water from Helene. And because depending on your hurricane doors or different preparations that people do, there's water intrusion systems. There's different things that people are trying. Everyone's trying to keep water out. It's different for every property. And he did okay. He had a 4-plex, 2 apartments downstairs had damage. Everything was hauled out. And then now we had garbage piles lining the streets. And now we got a Cat 5 hurricane come barreling at us. And it was a little sketchy. And you could hear the panic running around, going down to Home Depot. I was figuring out, what do I do? Can I net down some of my trash piles so it doesn't go flying into my neighbors' houses? People were buying, they didn't have sandbags, things like that. People were buying bags of soil, anything they could try to find for sandbags. So it was kind of interesting. But this is a text I got, sent to my next door neighbor that was staying through the hurricane. He was upstairs directly next door. And he's like, yeah, it was pretty bad. He's like, yeah, your entire backyard's gone and scattered over the neighborhood. And Anka's my daughter, and she's got a couple little pet rabbits, or she just had one at the time. And him and his girlfriend watched it float out, and it had a big knot of like some bark tree, like wood that the rabbits would chew on, or rabbit would chew on, and they saw it floating, and they thought the rabbit was in there sailing out to the canal and sinking. They're like, oh, so, but it was pretty bad. This is my house. This is next to a neighbor's house. A couple of boats floated up and smashed up into the house. One of the preparations you can kind of see here, I sandbag, not my doors. I sandbag my driveway, because normally if we just take a small amount of storm surge, a lot of neighbors have had problems from wakes, because dudes in trucks like to drive down to see what kind of damage is going on. And so some of the streets that are a little lower, no, they'll put out no wake signs in the street because to prepare for it, because trucks come barreling down and so you take waves. So I just try to diminish that a little and stop. I don't even try to. I've tried so many different things, blocking, and been through a few of these, but nothing this bad. This is one of the little restaurants. And then we were getting news reports like, oh, 12 killed, 20. Very hard. Florida does not like to report on deaths from people drowning, from you name it. It's really hard to kind of narrow it down. My doctor was telling me about, like, one of the sheriffs, his wife and 14-year-old son had drowned in their house, or one of his patients, the guy was elderly, his wife died in his hands, he just couldn't hold her up anymore. I mean, people were hiding on top of their kitchen countertops and still up to water in their waist. And I mean, it was pretty bad. There's some pretty harrowing stories. The beach is normally one of those sugar sand beaches, pristine, and we had all sorts of stuff floating up. And this is still quite a ways into the recovery. With just sand was washed in. Gulf Boulevard is our main strip that goes along the beach, and then there's hotels and host houses and structures on the Gulf side, and then other stuff that was not on the Gulf side. Some of them were pushed in, sit like solid walk-like walls, just caved in, and lots of damage. This is my little work shed. I have a tiny little place. You saw it all floated down, and this is a little rack where I keep all my nice DeWalt drills and tools and everything, nail guns and all the sawzalls and whatnot. And I had just been helping one of our tenants who has an animal rescue facility that had just suffered a big fire in her facility around the corner. And so she'd had to move her animals, and she had to move them again. I was building rabbit cages and enclosures. She's got alligators and crocodiles and lemurs and foxes and you name, all sorts of stuff. So all my tools were just in a box, and I put it in my hallway, and it was on the ground. So I lost all my tools. It was pretty bad. Stuff just kind of floated around. Yeah, all those were just trashed. All my outdoor stuff, a lot of my outdoor stuff got scattered all around. Luckily, my one neighbor that stayed, he found and pulled back. That's like my daughter's kayak. Pulled back most of the stuff he could find. I didn't lose too much. This is another neighbor around the corner. One of my friends, and her and her husband, they took a shipping container in the front yard, and that's a refrigerated one where they sell fish. So that they do get fresh catch, and there's commercial deliveries and large trucks coming out of there every day taking hauls. All the commercial captains are coming in. This is one of the few in the city that they're coming in, bringing in tons of fish coming through. And so it took them, I want to say a month or 2 months to get that out of there. And yeah, and it was a mess. And then that was her backyard. And she called the city like, hey, I got a dumpster in my jacuzzi. She had fish swimming in the pool. And you know what the city told her? You get it to the street and we'll come pick it up. So it took six.
You don't want your dumpster back.
So it took 6 people to get that pulled up by hand, and tried to get it out through the bushes, and oof. Where's this? This is right after Milton. So 2 weeks later, we took Milton, and now we had a wind damage, and these are the power lines, and I had power lines down all across my driveway, and it's like, whoa. I had evacuated for Hurricane Milton with my next door neighbor and his wife, and they're in their 70s, late 70s, and we evacuated there, and we were trying to watch when the hurricane was going to hit, and we were having a little hurricane party. We were up in Jacksonville at one of their family's house, and then the wife had a heart attack and heart stop, but CPR works back in 30 seconds, and we had an ambulance there in about 5 minutes. So, but she's up and running around now and back up. But it was a stressful time in this place. It was interesting. Yeah, displacements. So we had like hundreds displaced. So lots of businesses. They say 3,700 displaced families, but we had well over 10,000 in FEMA funded hotels all over the place. And so FEMA came in, they set up their little centers, and SBA and all these different volunteer organizations came in. And people were like, I lost my power for 3 hours and my food died, and my food's rotten, and I lost power. So you had people that, they didn't have a property that was damaged, but they're in a hotel because maybe their job got lost or something like that. So it kind of flooded the resources available. So that's something. It was tough finding a place to live. When I drove back in after Helene or after Milton, my wife and daughter and I, we got back. We were checking on some neighbors and friends' properties for them. My next door neighbor stayed up in Jacksonville because his wife was still in the hospital, and they have a fourplex that had taken 23 inches of water. Well, their roof got ripped off during Helene. I was going to stay in one of their upper apartments, and I've stayed in some of their apartments before during some storm surge events that didn't have big winds. And I was like, okay, hey, your house is trashed. I was like, whew, it's bad. Went in and took pictures, and it wasn't good. We had the local emergency folks came in, and then what they did initially, because we're on an island, they raise the drawbridges and they don't let people come back on, and then until they can do their assessments. And then we had so much sand that the roads were closed. It took me, I don't know how long. I probably got in from Tokyo maybe 2 days later. It's kind of a blur, but 2.5-ish days later, I get in. Luckily, it was right as they were allowing past residents to come back in. So they have a program. If you have like a placard you put in your car that says, hey, you're registered with your address. Hey, I'm a local resident. I'm supposed to come in. Well, I don't know where mine was. I lost it. But at least they let me in with my driver's license. So, and then but prior to that, the only people getting on the island were people that were there, that stayed. And then the local captain network came together. So a lot of boat captains came together, and they were ferrying people to go check on their properties, to check on things, bringing some resources in. And then like my neighbor that I was texting with, hey, what do you need? I was able to call him and say, and one of my other neighbors, hey, get in my house. They had keys but couldn't find them, so they got the door open. Just I think cut the lock or did something, and I would like open up as much as I can, and I'm like, hey, can you send some pictures? And my one neighbor's like, no, it's pretty bad. And so it's like, oh.
You don't want to see it.
Yeah, I was like, oh boy. And then I was like, all right, we'll get in my attic. At least I had a blackout kit in my attic that didn't get water in it, so I had extension cords, power inverter, because there's also a big parking structure. So anyone that stays during a storm surge event, they'll put their cars up in an elevated parking structure. So at least save your cars. I learned that. I've now lost 2 cars from flooding, but so my neighbors were able to get their car out. They were able to get some extension cords and start running their refrigerator. And I had like battery powered fans. I had my Berkey was still there, didn't get flooded out. So I was like, grab the Berkey. I had tons of extra water up in my attic. I had tons of batteries, things like that, some comfort items and things. So I was at least able to let them have a little bit to kind of assist and them for a couple of days. And then on my way in, I stopped at my storage unit and grabbed some stuff. But we had, it was a lot of people came to help. We had some of the local businesses were going around with just little carrying carts, pulling like pallets or cases of water and handing out cold water. There was a bunch of different groups that came in giving out food plates, and so it was pretty good to see a lot of resources come in to help and a lot of volunteers. For me, I was able to get a lot of help early on from network, from my neighbors and friends, and then from some of the veteran support network really helped me. I've been participating a lot with Warrior Sailing, and I've raced with them. I've taken a lot of their sailing courses, and been sailing with them for about 5 or 6 years. They called me up, hey Eric, do you need any help? Yes. And then one of my neighbor that had the big shipping container jammed up in a dumpster in her driveway, she comes running around the corner, said, there's Samaritan's Purse here. Hey, come sign up. They can come help and clear your house. So I ran back with her. I got signed up, and then I ended up being the first person in the city that they came and helped. And so they threw a whole crew at me. I think 2 crews the first day, and then they came the second day with another crew. But I have a triplex, so it's 3 little apartments, and they only would clear my unit. And then some of the veteran community, they come and they worked on my other 2 units. And then a group of volunteers came in from a club that's like a water-based boating club for veterans down in the area. and I brought a bunch of volunteer crews to that, and then I was able to kind of, hey, all right, this other vet needs help here. When it's like there was a little Vietnam vet guy that slipped in his house trying to clean stuff up and fell and busted his face, and so we were able to get some more folks there, and that was a really a significant help. And that network, it's important. So they were hustling to pull stuff out, and it's just, all right, take everything out and throw it on the curb. So there's my lovely bride and my daughter Annika. I think they've both been up here before.
Mhm.
There's some of the crew. Another crew. So we had just stuff jammed up, and it was quite a mess. Some of the Warrior Sailing guys. This is a picture from across the street, upstairs unit where I'm now renting a place, and I've been renting since probably December. And this picture was taken in mid-December, and then this is from damage from September. I mean, it took a while, and they were throwing lots of resources at it, but it was nutty. Especially, they were trying to do as much as they could before as Hurricane Milton was approaching. The governor was, hey, we're gonna, he's trying to get the trucks to move, and then our local dump closed, and we went and like, nope, we're opening it, and they forced it open. He had came down and given a press conference like right on my street, just around the corner, down in the little, right up by that little village I was talking about. But this was a mess that continued to get worse. This is even this unit, the pile got over the second floor balcony, and so that was a good neighbor of mine. And then the trucks, because we had power lines, they come in with their big claw machines hauling out stuff, and they could only reach so far. So we had to constantly every day we're hauling trash, just moving it forward. It was a process. This was a couple months later, just trying to get this. And then at one point, this thing kept having to reshuffle around, and it was all jammed up underneath the eave and smashing the stuff, and it got stuck up on a fence. And so at one point, I've got my car with a tow strap pulling it one direction, the other neighbor's pulling it with a truck one direction. He's trying to lift it up and get that thing moved around, and finally got it out. But whew. There's some other pictures. I didn't pull it off the net, but there was an area in Treasure Island, the city south of us. There, just boats just slammed up against houses. It was a mess. So like 2 years before, we had Hurricane Ian that was supposed to be a direct impact on our place, and my preparations have kind of changed over the years. I learn from every disaster. I learn from every time we take a little saltwater bath, the gardens don't like it. And what we were expecting was 12 to 15 feet of storm surge that would have been in my attic. So it's like, yep, nope, we're out of here. So we boogied up to our Georgia place. We spent about 12 hours prepping. We've gotten our prep down significantly by changing how we have things in the yard, changing what we do. But we got caught flat-footed on Helene though. We'd stack furniture, sandbag driveways. We would take a lot of our go bags, important documents. And that's one thing that got me is I had like go bags, like I had boxes where they were elevated. Well, your furniture floats around when it gets flooded. And all my important documents, poof, like screwed up. Gun safe, 42 inches of water. Oh, so hey, everyone that talks about boating accident, hey, this shit happened to me for real. So, yeah, so that was. This is some of the stuff we would stack. Like, I'm a weirdo into like a lot of the mid-century modern stuff and furniture and houses. We'd stack a lot of weird things, drag in furniture, stack up stuff. Well, some of my nice gotta protect the booze. I lost so much booze. Oh my God, I have a collection of booze from all around the world, from Russia, Mongolia, Japan, from Europe. These things were on a bar that got knocked over and floated, and those things floated all around the house. And only one broke was the amber colored one, but all the other ones made it. They just random places. The stuff that floated around and made it standing up was so bizarre. I think I had a couple cases of beer stacked in our laundry room, all busted open, spread all over the house. So recovery obstacles. This is it's been I'll tell you, it's been a journey. We're over 6 months into this, and the city, which kept changing their goalposts on permit requirements, things of that nature. The Samaritan's Purse folks that helped me, they were a couple days later, they were trying to help the same neighbors that had that shipping container, the city started doubling down on patrols. They were doing 5 times a day with code enforcement. Where's your permits? Where's your permits for demo? They stopped the Samaritan's Purse from helping and shut them down. Like, no, you're not helping these people. It was absolutely insane. I mean, it was pretty bad. We had kind of had a plan, my wife and I, like, hey, before we bought on an island, we were probably going to take a hurricane at some point. So we realized it, and we kind of understood that. And our plan was, okay, we'll take whatever insurance money we can and build up. Well, that kind of changed a little bit. Things kind of changed a bit. We had a couple apartments so we lost some rental income, things of that nature. So many businesses were hit or miss. It was really different. A lot of the businesses were able to get away with 0 permits and they just fixed stuff. And the town's such a tourist town, they kind of look blind eye to that. Hey, we want to bring business back in, get them up and running. So some people just did it. Some places didn't. It was kind of battle of the bands between the different island cities. Like, who was worse? Who's worse on permits? Who's worse on this? Who's worse on that? So it's been a really interesting process. We had the next city over, the mayor just resigned and left. Our mayor, 2 months prior to the hurricane, had resigned, saying in an open letter, hey, the city manager and the commissioners are corrupt and crooked, and I just can't work here. He was a retired firefighter. He's like, nope, I'm not doing this. And so we had a vice mayor in charge, and they're trying to help, but also not. I think they were taking FEMA money, and they were putting all the overtime, and they used to do code enforcement patrols 5 days a week, every day, since I've owned the place. They're serious. They red tag quicker than anything, and they want their money. But it was bizarre.
What's that 50% rule?
So FEMA has a 50% rule, which it's a bizarre thing, and they're trying to encourage people to elevate. And there's a whole program called like Elevate Florida and Elevate Island, this Treasure Island, or this program. They want you to elevate, and you got to build your house, and then you're not allowed to occupy the bottom level. So it depends where you are. And they want you to be, FEMA has a rule to be 10 feet above the base flood elevation. So you got to elevate that, and then you can't occupy that space, but you can use it as garage space. Some people just have open, it's just open. They just have pilings or pillars that are holding up the structure. You could have like a lanai kind of area, maybe some storage stuff, but you're not supposed to have livable space down there. And you're not supposed to have like mechanical systems. You can have like your elevator shaft, but you can't have they even elevate your electric panels, elevate a lot of your different access, nothing mechanical you're supposed to have. And then if you are trying to save like a 1-story structure, you're only allowed to spend up to 50% or about 49% of the value of your structure, not the land. And so they have it so now there's like, some houses they got like maybe only 30 or 40,000. So then there's this whole fiasco of getting cash value appraisals for pre-storm, and so many of them are getting kicked back, and it's been a bizarre journey on that. I think we can save our house without even trying to get another cash value appraisal and use what the county has on record, because I don't want to increase the value because then my taxes will go up. But I think I can get it done. And so now we're kind of dealing with that. But I got a letter from the city in late January. Hey, you're substantially damaged. And I was like, what? And they're not available to talk to you. Like maybe sometimes once a week for 2 hours, 3 hours. And it's kind of bizarre. So I waited a week. I went in. All right. And I had typed up, this is what I'm asking. Okay, what percentage am I substantially damaged? They go 50.9%. It's like, what? It's like, all right. And they're like, well, you can appeal it. Okay. And I said, can I get the data? And they're like, oh, no, we can't get the data. We had some subcontractors had done it from a group. And now there's big group lawsuits going on now. And there's very angry people. And they're like, I want this data. And people just came around. They walked down the street, and then they used some LiDAR data to see what the flood levels were. And then they just made assumptions of what it was inside people's houses. They tried walking onto properties. And a lot of the neighbors like, get off my property, things like that. And we had lots of looters. That was an interesting thing. Lots of people that weren't welcome. Lots of scrappers. You saw those piles. When we were getting ready to evacuate for Hurricane Milton, U-Hauls with meth heads lined up down the street, just waiting for us to leave. I was like, come on. And And it was just a mess. And I probably, for the first few months, I think I was running off 1 or 2 people a day. I didn't really mess with calling the sheriffs much. I think I only called them once or twice, and they reacted pretty quick. But it's been a
Case for pepper balls.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then catching them in the act, and then my place got pretty hit. So and I had to finally start borrowing power from a neighbor that he had some panels working. My 3 panels were underwater, so pretty fun. And then I finally got we had some internet and now I could start getting some of my cameras back up and running. So we got a camera network on the neighbor's house and my house together. We share interesting stuff. So yeah, here's a little bit more stuff. But yeah, so this is what FEMA states though about that 50%. And then the cities are interpreting it how they want. So it's different from area to area.
Okay, the replacement.
So
if it's more than 50% of the cost, then you should be replacing. Is what they're saying.
Correct.
Instead of repairing.
So this has been an issue, and we knew about this before because one of our neighbors was renovating a triplex right next to us, and they'd gutted down, and they got caught demoing without a permit. They were delayed 6 months, charged $10,000 in fines, absolutely insane. And then he had to hire an attorney to fight his way out of it. And so what he had to do is get a new appraisal, and he had to stop mid-construction after like certain units, get it reappraised. Now he's paying more taxes, and then they can, okay, now you can spend so much money, and you have to be you got to really work. You've got only so much to work with. So here's your budget. What do you got to do? I mean, I got 3 units. I got 3 kitchens. I got 4 bathrooms. I got 3 air conditioning systems. I had 1 hot water heater system. My propane system all busted apart and water leaked into all the piping. And at least my tank was fine. But so I'll keep the tank, and I got to rebuild that. But it's interesting. So, but the cities are treating it differently, and some of them were initially requiring, hey, we have to get an inspection of your home. Now the government wants to come inside everybody's property. And it's like, ooh, luckily we didn't have that happen to us. And so you had lots of threatened lawsuits. There's been several started. The city next to us is a little worse. And it's a mess. It's just not good. So right now it's still a lot of abandoned homes. And then another problem was once the power grid was set up and fixed, and they started energizing homes, house fires. There was a lot of people didn't shut because they weren't there, or they were part-time living there and they didn't shut their panels off. That was my one request to my neighbor, like, shut my breakers off, please, And so that was done before I even flew in. FEMA funds, they're like partially dispersed. They're not. It's really difficult. I was set up in a FEMA hotel after about 3 or 4 weeks. So we just bounced around. My place was so trashed. I was like, oh man. I was like, we're not going to stay here. And so, I mean, with the little girl and my wife, we hopscotch from hotels. We would look, okay, what can I get some kind of deal for 4 days or this or that, and trying to find something, Airbnbs, you name it. So we were bouncing around. Then finally we ended up getting a hotel voucher, and we actually got set up pretty nice. We lived in a hotel on the beach. First, it was just a little like 1-room place, and then we ended up with a 2-bedroom apartment that had a kitchen, which was nice because living in a hotel, food gets expensive, real expensive. And I had like, I got my 10 cans with dried food, but I'm not eating that shit at this point. And it's just too stressful. I was like, all right. So my diet went out the window. I fell off the keto wagon. I think I gained 20 something pounds since then. It's like, whew. Maybe drinking a little extra beer. And then so some places, we're opening, and then everyone, so we were kind of celebrating as each little restaurant or business. We were kind of friends with a lot of different people, and let's go throw some business at them in there. And then like FEMA they started to do a series where they had so many people in hotels, and they were trying to really evaluate, like, do you need to be here? Do you really not? Well, due to some clerical error, hey, we get a notice, get the hell out of the hotel. So we had a week notice to vacate the hotel, or they're going to stop paying. They're like, you don't have to vacate, but you're going to have to pay. And it was like $300-400 a night. So we ended up going back to our house and set up shop in there with a extension cord coming from the neighbors. And it was in mid-December. It was cold. We were getting down into the 40s and 30s. And so I had a couple space heaters, and we buttoned up as best we could. Christmas lights running through the house, a couple lanterns, things like that. A lot of my lanterns were destroyed. And Yeah, fun stuff. And then so FEMA goes, oh, it's this clerical error, but we'll set you up in an apartment. We'll give you an apartment voucher, and they're like, we'll cover up to so much. I was like, okay, great, I got a budget. All right, I find an apartment directly across the street. Called up one of my friends. Hey, he has a 6-unit, and he renovated everything from ground up, all new electric, plumbing, everything prior to the hurricane. So his bottom threes were trashed. I'm like, can I get the apartment closest to my house? He's like, sure, pick which one you want. And then I go back to FEMA. Hey, are you sure you guys are going to pay me? And they're like, yes, yes. I still don't have money. I called on the way up. I was driving. Hey, what's the status? We don't know. Can you elevate this? Like, what's going on? You know, and I'm paying for rent more than my mortgage and insurance and taxes on my three apartments. It's a mess. So don't count on the government. And you know, you really need to, shocking, but be prepared to kind of handle stuff on your own. And we did take a break. I think after Milton, we wanted to get it like a little breather. So we boogied up to our Georgia house. And I mean, we're stressed. We're still probably in shock. All we did was, every time we go up, we work on the property, but I think we just worked the whole time. I mean, till we went from when we got up to when we went to bed, and it was just like it was stressful. And then we were so worried about the property down in Florida, and then we had to make some decisions. It's like we could have just cut ties and said, "Wow, let some people take it. We'll figure it out later." And we could have just moved up to our Georgia place, but we wanted to stay there, keep an eye on what's going on, try to figure out what's there, and we really like that place. It's been our primary place. We've traveled a lot, like I mentioned. I was going around to a lot of different veteran things. So last year, we're not. I think for homestead purposes of status, we're not supposed to travel more than 6 months. So I was traveling less than 6 months. And for homeschool purposes, you're not supposed to be out of the state for more than 30 days time. So I was never out of the state more than 30 days, but we traveled a lot. We were on the road maxed out. So now we've slowed down a bit. This is the kind of updates our city gives us on how things are going. They're talking about like, okay, permits issued, applications. Now, this is updated, last week or so. Full demo permits, 125. That's tearing houses down. So there's a lot of houses going down. A lot of buildings are going down. Some of the hotels are going down. Condo complexes. It's been a nightmare.
Full demo would mean somebody decided it was over 50%.
Yeah, it's over 50%, or it's just somewhat, because you have also some places from like the 40s that are little bungalows that are wood. Some places didn't fare so well, or they just got like one house that was right on the Gulf. It got lifted off its foundation and dropped back down, and it's like, whew. So they like some of them it's at some point it's just too damaged. The particular property we got, it's masonry block, terrazzo floor. Yeah, some systems are trash, and I got to get new ones, new appliances, and lower cabinets. But I can muck that out and spray it down, get it polished, and so there. And the walls were fine, so we withstood the wind, and so I think I have a good case for keeping it. But some people were a little bit too trash, and then also they're being also intimidated into tearing down with these letters that was false information from this substantial damage letters. This is garbage for the most part. Because they won't explain it. They won't, it's nuts. Like the city hall lady that I spoke to when I said, "Hey, what's my percentage?" "Oh, you're 50.9%. I went back a couple weeks ago. I asked the same question. "Oh, we don't have that data." Huh, interesting.
Somebody told to stop giving it out.
So it's bizarre. And then these are the hours you can talk to them. All right.
It's about time for torches and pitchforks.
Is there a reason they were encouraging teardowns?
They want people to elevate because they want to. There's a future plan that they want to elevate, which our main road is Gulf Boulevard. They want to elevate that 2 feet, and they want to elevate the roads. But if you have they can't elevate them above you, or they're going to flood you out. So they want everyone up, and so now what?
Was there also some conversation here about them wanting to build bigger buildings and stuff too?
We have so I've sat in on some of the zoning discussions, and we've had workshops in our city, and they're trying to keep the feel of the old fishing village, but it's still a touristy area. But so there's restrictions. So if I rebuild, I'll talk to that in a minute. But if I rebuild, I'm allowed. So I've got FEMA requirement to stay 10 feet above the base flood elevation. And then the city on their website is like, oh, it's 2 feet above. So my neighbor, we're getting elevation surveys. What can we do? My neighbor figures out with a 2-story, he's got a 2-story 4-unit. He's like, I'm just going to abandon my bottom 2 apartments. Screw it. I'm just going to put 2 apartments up top. I'm going to fix them up. And he goes into the city and he's like, all right, I meet this elevation status. And they're like, no, it's 4 feet above FEMA. And he's like, but your website says this. Oh, it's wrong. And he's 6 inches off. And there, can I get a variance? Nope. And so he's going to have to probably tear his house down. And it's just terrible. And that's a cement block structure that's fine. I mean, it's literally insane. So
does rebuilding after a tear down reset your homestead value? This is a property tax.
There's some tax issues. So what they're stating, and our county appraiser is saying, if you build up, you can build up to 110% of the size of your current structure without a tax increase. So they're allowing that. Well, correct. Yeah. So and then we're limited. So you've got to be. So I've got to be 14 feet above the base flood elevation to the top of my floor, the first floor that's livable, and I'm allowed to have 2 floors that are livable, and I can have a rooftop terrace, and I can have and then above the rooftop terrace I can have extending an elevator shaft. I can have a ham radio tower only to a certain degree. It's like 10 or 11 feet or something. It's really limited. I can have some I could have some solar panels with like a little thing. So I've thought through some of that. Let's see. So I took this picture the night before I was driving up here. This is another one just right around the corner from here. This is I think it was a 6-unit apartment complex, and it went down to the ground. It's like you're constantly hearing these big excavators just tearing houses down, and they're going down. And this is another option. You can elevate. So there's actually people that are taking their old house, jacking it up, and putting pilings under it.
So you've got about 5
Oh,
minutes.
perfect.
If you have.
Yep. So our options, like I said, is tear down. I've gotten quotes on a mason block building, ICF, shipping container buildings, but to get 3 apartments and to do what I want, it's about a $2 million ticket. Or I got the money to just rebuild it. So the spreadsheet doesn't lie.
Yes.
I don't.
Yes.
So we've thought about this. This is something we really wanted to try to do is if we elevated, I wanted to make a lot more handicap accessible rooms, and we have a business model plan that we would do is target snowbirds for because that off hurricane season prices is crazy high, and then I was going to try to do like a month on either end, like spring and fall, where I could bring in week at a time, like injured and disabled veterans and things like that. So I was trying, that would be a passion of mine to do that. It's just right now, the way we look at how we look at it, I can't bring enough income in to be able to afford a $2 million loan, So, and then ICF was about 10% more cost than regular masonry block. And then shipping containers, they can do those up to Cat 5 rated. That's same cost as masonry block. So, but originally we were getting quotes of like over 3 million. Yeah. So I'll cruise through this a little bit. Yeah, having like the normal prep shit, like buying stuff that Jack puts out or Nicole talks about. We had a ton of it. I kept a storage unit in high ground. So that's a generator and portable air conditioners and more extension cords and empty fuel cans and all sorts of stuff. Fuel, I had clothes, all the stuff I needed. And then I was so trash, I ended up giving a lot of it out or letting people borrow a lot of it. And so like air conditioners went to a family that was living with, nothing, things of that nature, portable heaters. And then let's push. Oh, and then I met this guy. He's an interesting character. He lives in the island south, and he wrote a book. He suffered through a lot of PTSD, and he went on a journey to find happiness. And even him, he's been calling out. He lives in Treasure Island. He's calling out the mayor and the city council like, this is just bad. I mean, it's really terrible what you do. But so it's an interesting book. I'll show you guys if you want. And then I just want to get back in my home and enjoy it. And then one thing I did learn is being elevated, I feel a little disconnected though from the ground. And that's one thing I want to get back, just living on the ground and get out. Like, I've had all my issues and brain injury stuff and memory stuff. My wife always found out being I'll be over in the garden picking weeds or doing something and just putzing around. This is Christmas boat parade we have. Comes down our canal and comes back around. It's a pretty fun time. We always have a little barbecue. So that's what I'm trying to get back to. And then I'll take questions for a little bit.
There's a little time for questions if you want to ask.
And then one thing I brought out is I brought back some of the sea debris I used to get yelled at from the hotel I was living in. I'd walk around picking up that stuff and I'd put it up on my car and they're like, we're trying to clean. They got the little, bobcats pulling sand out. And I'm like, don't worry, I'll take it over to my house. I collected a lot of stuff. When we'd walk the beach, I'd walk with my daughter and wife. And my daughter likes to do art and sell a little art and sell sponges and things like that. And so we're getting ready to, I think we're going to file taxes on her this year and start a IRA for her. But I would like everyone to take home a little piece of the beach. If you want to give a little contributions to my daughter, you're welcome. Question, or I think you were first.
In terms of, I know you have a lot of people who want to help and come and volunteers and stuff like that. What are some of the what are some of the things that you want from volunteers? What's that they can provide?
It's kind of phase based, and so there's that initial immediate response, and I was pretty much in shock. But the immediate need I had was I needed that house gutted of all the water debris and stuff, and I needed that out before we have mold issues. I needed the mold treatments, so that was a big thing I kept up on was fungicides and spraying down. I've tried different things, and then that was a big thing needed, and then food and water resources. Like I said, I had the ability to kind of do my own food, but I really wasn't interested in cracking open number 10 cans of freeze-dried food. So it was helpful when there was different food kitchens that came around. And then your typical sanitary items, people needed water. Like our local grocery store was pretty trash, but they kept pallets of water and pallets of ice. So ice was really needed. And then they had a lot of different volunteer centers where people would come bring donations, little donation centers that popped up. And it was different for each family, but sometimes it was clothes, sometimes it was toys, sometimes it was air mattress or things like that. And it just kind of depended. And then as things progressed, the needs kind of changed a little bit. And then once like you get like the, big federal disasters declared, now you get like FEMA coming in, and they did help out getting people into hotels and shelters and things of that nature. But memory doesn't last very long, and the motivation to assist doesn't last very long. And I mean, this was not anything near what happened in North Carolina as this storm continued to barrel up.
Yeah,
It was nothing like what they went through. Like I felt terrible when the Samaritans first were helping me, and they're like, "Hey," I'm like, "What about the people up there? They're going through."
Luckily, they Samaritans first, because that's where they're based on.
Mhm.
They were the first ones on the scene for helping people.
Okay, they were an amazing resource.
Unbelievable, but they only covered a small area.
Okay.
And becoming a one of their responders, or just volunteering for them, they have very specific requirements. And like, I couldn't stay in my van going to a site to go and help people.
Oh, really?
I wasn't allowed to stay in my van. I had to go inside, and I couldn't have my dog with me, even though he's my service dog.
We had some similar. You could service dog. I'd call BS on that one.
No, because what if people were allergic to dogs and stuff? No,
it's a medical. It's a medical tool.
Yeah,
It's
was all the little things like that, and it was
but
like
we had some similar issues with campers and stuff on property. What our governor said, hey, blanket, next 3 years, you can have a camper in your front yard. There's no local ordinances that can shut you down. So, okay, hey, I've had my cousin wanted to come visit with her camper. Come bring it down. Like we had another friend wanted to bring in a big camper. All right, come on down, man. Like, so hey, take it is what it is. Yes, Jack?
So imagine you said you were in Asia.
Yes.
So let's say that 48 hours before you left, you knew this was going to happen. You knew exactly what you know now. You got 2 days. What's a couple of things you might have done before you evacuated or went ahead and went to Asia?
What we would have done is prepped our yard a little better. We did have one tenant stay back, and he was saying, "I'm going down with the ship. I'm staying." I'm like, "Get out, get out. Yeah. If you stay, put your car in there." And he ended up got too drunk the night before, I think, and didn't get a space in the parking structure, so he ended up leaving. but he did clear some of our outdoor stuff and piled it on our leeward side where we wouldn't take as much wind. But inside, I would have took documents, seed phrases gone.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Oh,
My seed phrases.
seed.
Oh,
Oh.
Guys, back them up. In
Yeah.
think about where you could lose them, how you could lose them from a fire, from something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you lose them? Like,
Yeah.
don't have access to your.
And I don't remember my password to my. Yeah, bad. I'm starting over. So.
Oh,
You gotta talk about some durable ways of doing that.
So I need to learn, and because of my brain injuries, I forgot a lot of stuff. So now I'm just starting over again. So I've got just a little bit. So I'm gonna have to go back through some. I'm gonna have to go back, and I mean, maybe if some of you guys have some free time, I need to figure out what wallet works good now and all that. But I'm starting over. Hey, lessons learned, right? Yeah, and then like safes and salt water ain't good for guns. I'll tell you that. There's so there. I've learned a lot of lessons, but what I would have done is I would have taken, because I had the capacity to put stuff into a storage unit.
Yeah.
I could have moved a lot of my stuff. I could have elevated some of my stuff. I showed you pictures of stacking. That's normally what I'd done.
Yeah.
We didn't do any of that. So that's what I would have done. But I was already gone before the window of warning came.
Yeah.
I was already out of the country. So yes.
Yeah, you were pretty prepared for this. I'm just thinking.
Not really.
Well, I mean, you weren't there,
It caught me flat-footed.
But I mean, being that you had all you did, what was one or two things you wish you would have had that you didn't afterwards?
My seed freighters would be nice. I would have my important documents, jewelry and stuff that all my wife's jewelry stuff that. I mean, we were to keep it, but it's been compromised, and some of it has, and pearls and things like that. Some of the other stuff gets washed off, but I have a real issue. I struggled with my brain injury stuff and getting medically retired, and I hadn't done my taxes, but I had all my paperwork with all my taxes going back to 21.
Yeah.
It's all covered in sewage, nasty, stuck together, turning black mold. So luckily, I could go back. We did finally just catch up on filing our taxes, at least caught up to 23, and then we're on an extension for 24.
So I've got two pieces of high value info for everybody. The first is I was just talking to, I won't identify him, PhD civil engineer who's been doing modeling for FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we now know is that when the original maps were done, where they figured out where flood-prone areas were, they were not very accurate. What they're figuring out now with next generation LiDAR data is that there are, in a lot of areas, the number of buildings that they allow to be built in flood-prone areas is sometimes as high as twice as high as they originally thought. What that means is that the risk profiles from all the insurance companies are way wrong. Okay. And the reinsurance sitting behind that is way wrong. And then the government funding. So the reason FEMA is now having to be so aggressive in trying to keep people from building back into some of these flood-prone areas is because the entire insurance, reinsurance, and then all of the money coming from the federal agencies to backstop all of that is way lower, right? Because than it needs to be, because the risk is a lot higher.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what's been happening over the past few years as we're having all these events is it's put stresses on the system that are way out of all of the old actuarial modeling, way out.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening now is they're coming back in, and FEMA is very actively coming into areas that have been flooded and trying to do everything they can to drive not rebuilding into some of the 100-year floodplain areas. The tool they have is economic to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening now, of course, is that the insurance companies are going, we're not touching this. We're not touching these areas because we now have better data. We're not going to touch it. And so now the bank won't give you a mortgage because you can't get it insured. Yeah. So that's just the landscape we're working on right now with all these, a lot of these flood areas, all these places I've worked with that have been flooded. The second piece is a piece of practical information for people whose buildings have been flooded. I do a lot of bioremediation work, and a lot of people in bioremediation talk about remediating soil, and they talk about remediating water. They don't talk about bioremediating buildings. And you just had a biological contamination event in the building, right? What that means is you need to do bioremediation on the building before you reoccupy.
Oh, yes.
Now, so what everybody tries to do is go in, we're going to sterilize the building, right? Because we got mold and so forth. So we go in and we use, the different chemical compounds. We try to get rid of all the mold out of the building and so forth. Well, you're never going to get out all the cracks and corners and so forth. It just, you can't get all of it. So the technique I've been using that's been somewhat successful, we call competitive exclusion, which is let's get some good guys in there to help keep the bad guys from taking over. Because when you go in and you sterilize it, you've made this ecological niche. And if the only thing left in the building is a few little bits and pieces of the bad guys in all the corners, guess who repopulates? So here's my trick. When you get it going and you're ready to go back in, you know how to do sauerkraut? Okay. Take in a couple big batches of sauerkraut and put them in there and let them ferment in the kitchen, and then milk kefir.
Okay.
Milk kefir and sauerkraut both will populate the building with incredibly competitive exclusion friendly microbes, and you'll get good guy microbes all through the building, and it will populate all the nooks and crannies, and it will help keep the bad guys from taking over your building.
Just point of clarification.
Yes.
For selfish reasons.
Yep.
After I make the sauerkraut and milk kefir, I just put it out and let it sit there open air.
Yeah.
You can, but just actually the whole thing of just letting it ferment in the building.
Okay, because there's a fermentation lock on mine.
Yeah, so what's happening is every time that fermentation lock burps, it goes poof. Good guys go all over the place.
No, that's a good point.
Right.
And then one thing I'm doing as well is I haven't done yet, but I'll be doing a termite treatment to all exposed wood.
Yes.
And everything I can access while I'm seeing it, I'm going to reach up as far as I can because I've got drywall cut to about the 4-foot level, and I will be doing as much termite treatment as I can, just as preventative.
The one other piece of valuable information. I hate to take up time.
No, please.
Here's this thing.
Take it up.
Okay. Drywall. So working with an architect who her specialty is building biology. She went in and she started looking at drywall. And they did samples and they analyzed them. Here's what they figured out. 95% of the drywall she tested had black mold spores actually dormant in the paper backing. Okay, and gypsum is basically black mold food. So all drywall is black mold chia pet. Just add water. Okay.
Yeah.
Literally, that's why anytime you get moisture, has anybody noticed you get moisture on drywall? What happens?
It wicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's because the black mold spores are dormant in the paper backing. So, yeah.
Everybody's like, oh no.
Your challenge is that they tell you go in and just cut your drywall up to here.
Can't.
Okay, you have to be really careful because you've got black mold spores dormant in the rest, and according to how much moisture got into it, you may have black mold
what we're
problems.
considering is because we've got masonry block.
Yes.
I'm thinking of getting rid of all the drywall, and I want to make it flood hardy where I can come in with a pressure washer and just spray down. I haven't come up with what we're seeing. Also, some people are doing is they're putting in. There's some PVC products that can click together, and they're doing that instead of drywall. So I'm seeing some neighbors trying different approaches. So we've been kind of watching while we've been in this waiting period. So we've been kind of hovering and waiting. And our plan is, because I've seen people with cement walls that just sprayed it off.
Exactly right.
And so we're trying to go to that concept that I have not come up with a solution yet for interior walls.
Yeah,
But my
they
plan
talk
is
about that. But what I would say is in a flood-prone
Yeah.
area like you're in, no drywall.
That's exactly what a bunch of our neighbors have been talking about. And so a lot of people, like the best things right now I'm hearing is the PVC product, and then or just going right to your brick and then painting it or sealing it.
I can show you microcrete
Okay.
at my house that I did. It's a little bit, it has a polymer in it that allows it to be a little bit flexible,
Okay.
so it doesn't crack super easy, and then you don't have that shape
Right.
It's kind of like stuck going
Okay.
over that, but
So those
that's what I did
those are
with my
some.
floor. I
Okay.
did it over subfloor. but
Okay.
yeah.
There's some concrete fiberboard options. There's, I mean, there's different.
Right, but I had thought about, and I'd been thinking about this the last few years. This is the first time we've taken water in a house. I've taken floods, and then one thing I do for my garden is the gypsum product that I sprinkle out, and that helps pull some of the salt out of the soil and pull it. And I'm usually able to get my plants up and running pretty quickly, and so.
You can talk
Okay.
to Eric here.
Yep.
We just went through the break.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Everybody was interested.
Okay.
John, do you mind if they take 5 to stretch their legs? You just go an hour either way. Yeah, let's take 5 minutes to stretch your legs if you need to. John needs to get set up, so he'll be on at 3 to 3:05. You get a full hour. Jack's demo for biochar starts around 4:15. Andy, can you introduce John at 5 after 3?
Yes, of course.
You're my new MC. I'm going to go down and make sure that biochar thing gets set up too during this. So I get to watch the recording of John's ham radio prezo. So
John, I'm gonna slide behind you.